Hello, Matthew Bell with Alzheimer'sProof.com, and today I have a three-parter for you. And I realized as I was compiling this information that there was far too much for me to compress into one video without losing content or making it overly long. I hope I don't go overly long in any case, but I'm going to try and break this into three different parts. And what I'm aiming to do is to provide you with my list of the top 25 herbs that are useful for treating, preventing, and so on, Alzheimer's or other kinds of dementia. The first thing I want to do is give a disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I am not a medical researcher. This information is for general, informational, or entertainment purposes only, and I am not diagnosing, treating, prescribing for any kind of condition. You yourself have to decide where you fall in the spectrum of supplements. I've talked about this elsewhere. There are really three different perspectives. You could be dead set against them and only focus on pharmaceutical interventions, and if that's the case, I've got video content pertaining to that. I've got people who are dead set against pharmaceuticals and who only go with alternative or holistic or natural kinds of remedies. And once again, I'm not trying to push any particular view, and then there's a kind of a complementarity view where one possibly can avail him or herself of a pharmaceutical intervention and also of an herbal remedy or a supplement or some kind of dietary change that might benefit you or a loved one. The 25 herbs I'm going to break into three different categories. So, and it's somewhat clumsy here, but the first category is going to be 10 herbs that have to do with Indian medicine or what is called Ayurveda. That's going to be the subject of video number one, this video right here. The second classification is going to be 10 herbs that really just don't fall into that Ayurvedic classification, but nevertheless are supposed to be useful. Some of those are going to be Chinese, European, South American, other kinds of herbs that are going to be useful potentially for some cognitive impairments, for memory enhancement, and this kind of thing. The last video is going to be my top 5 picks for herbs. Now, when I was reviewing my notes, it actually turned into my top 6, and I'll explain in that video why that is. And it's an interesting kind of a thing that was initially, I thought it was a goof, but it turned out to just kind of be a serendipitous kind of a thing, I think. But one of the herbs is so close in name to another one, and they both have something relevant to offer with respect to Alzheimer's disease, that I decided to leave both of them in. So the final video is basically my top 5 or 6, but I'll get to that in due time. Now, what I thought I would start off by doing, so that I don't want you to have to search for other videos if you don't want to look through the content, if you just want a nice list, I'm going to put a link down in the description, and you can find my list of 25 herbs. You can find all 25 right off the bat. If you just want a list of herbs and you just want, you don't want to go through all of the content, then feel free to click that link. Now, let me talk just a minute about the first 10. And those are, as I said, going to be herbs that proceed from Indian or Hindu tradition, and they are generally what is called Ayurvedic. I'll put that word up on the screen. Now, the Hindu tradition is somewhat philosophical, it's somewhat medical, it's somewhat religious, if you want to say that as well. And the Hindu tradition includes a number of different approaches that I'm not going to get into. So in Hindu tradition, there might be some use for what is called yoga, or in these yogic breathing techniques and other kinds of meditative techniques some practitioners hold are going to be beneficial. That may or may not be the case. It's just not the subject of this particular video. But in general, the Ayurvedic approach is concerned with balance. And if you want to get into the philosophy of it, there are other sources that are going to be suitable for you. And by the way, Ayurvedic as a word supposedly means the study of long life or the knowledge of longevity. But it's essentially how to live a balanced life so that you can live a long and healthy life. Now, one caveat here is some individuals worry that Ayurveda is part of quack science or pseudoscience. I don't really want to get into the discussion of whether that's the case or not. You can make up your own mind. One of the things, however, that I will say is that Western medicine has a long history of looking to traditional or folk medicine for inspiration or for research leads. And I would say, at the very least, That's the approach that one should understand with respect to this content. If you are all in an Ayurveda or all in a natural remedies, then more power to you. But if you are somewhat skeptical, I would simply suggest that the herbs that I'm about to name are being researched by Western and other scientists, some scientists from Korea and China and other places, and they're being investigated using scientific techniques to try and determine whether or not there's any basis to some of the folk medical recommendations. And there's a history here. For example, aspirin, or acetylsalicylic acid, it's a mouthful, it was synthesized in part from a chemical that is similar to a chemical that was found in the herbs meadowsweet and white willow. Morphine and opium were both synthesized from chemicals and compounds found in the poppy plant. Heart medicine, digitoxin, is derived from the plant foxglove, and I'm going to have an entire video just on poisonous plants, and foxglove is going to be on that one. Or the eye drop, atropine, is derived from Atropa belladonna, or deadly nightshade. There's an entire history of medical interventions being obtained from plants. And in fact, even in Alzheimer's, galantamine, which is sold under many brand names, but one of them is Reminil, comes from the galanthus, or the snowdrop flower, as well as the daffodil, which is basically the narcissus. Western medicine has a long history of looking to herbs and finding compounds that are the active ingredients, synthesizing those, possibly making them stronger, and then offering them with the benefit of some of the FDA and other testing that we are supposed to have in virtue of the confidence that we have in various pharmaceutical interventions. So with those caveats, and I know this has been overly long, I am going to get into the top 10 Ayurvedic herbs that can help to treat, prevent, or address symptoms of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. The first herb is called Ashwagandha, and its scientific name is Withania somnifera. Now, once again, Ayurvedic herbs are all going to be herbs that are at least going to have been used in Indian traditional medicine, that is to say, in Hindu tradition. There are a slew of alleged benefits that have to do with ashwagandha. One is that it supposedly lowers blood sugar. It's been alleged to be an anti-cancer compound. It's supposed to have antidepressant properties. One of the categories of herb that some of these are going to fall into is something called an adaptogen. And an adaptogen is one that has the capability, according to these practitioners, to either address a condition of a deficiency or an excess of some compound in the body. So it might be a deficiency or excess of a particular hormone or whatever case might be. It's supposed to kind of help to level you out is maybe the best way of putting it. And so ashwagandha is reputed to be an adaptogen along the lines of that. Now, one of its mechanisms is supposed to be that it lowers cortisol. Another one, and that is the stress hormone. Another herb that's going to do that, and we'll deal with that in my top 5 list, is going to be ginkgo. Also supposed to boost testosterone. It's supposed to lower cholesterol, and it's supposed to be an anti-inflammatory. Now, as another sidebar here, in another video, I get into the possible causes for Alzheimer's disease, and I'm not going to repeat myself here. This video would be interminable. The exact cause of Alzheimer's is, at this point, still unknown. So Alzheimer's could be caused by deficiency in acetylcholine, might be caused by an accumulation of amyloid or tau protein deposits in the brain. Some researchers believe that it might be caused by oxidation or oxidative stress, might be caused by chronic inflammation, it might be caused by a reduction of oxygen in the brain. There are a number of factors when we approach these herbs. What we're going to find time and again is that these herbs are going to pick up one of these strands of thought. So the top 25 herbs, each of them is going to have one or more different possible causes that it's going to address really well. So in the case of ashwagandha, notice that it was an anti-inflammatory in part. So if inflammation is one of the causes of Alzheimer's disease, then it might be wise to put anti-inflammatory compounds in your repertoire. And if so, ashwagandha is one of the ones that you might want to select. Now, in one of the articles that I consulted, it actually mentioned that ashwagandha was believed by some researchers to hold out promise for actually reversing Alzheimer's disease. That's actually from an article from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the U.S. Now, if you want to get the links to the citations, again, I'm going to direct you to the description in which I have a link that I have an article where you can see all the sources I used for this information. So ashwagandha is now believed to possibly be able to boost brain function, to be able to boost memory. And it's also supposed to have positive effects on epileptics. Now, there's a tie between epilepsy and Alzheimer's, or at least a hypothetical tie. I get into this a little bit more in one of my other videos because it turns out that there's a blood test being developed that has the ability, supposedly, to detect higher levels of this tau protein, and it might be predictive of people who are going to eventually succumb or to demonstrate or to display signs of Alzheimer's disease. A second Ayurvedic herb that is worth mentioning is going to be Brahmi. The scientific name for Brahmi is Bacopa monnieri. It's also known as water hyssop. Now, Brahmi has a reputation as a nervine or a nerve tonic. It is sometimes prescribed for such conditions as epilepsy, neuralgia. Once again, I just mentioned a connection between epilepsy and Alzheimer's, possible connection in terms of the tau protein involvement. Brahmi is also prescribed for digestional ailments, such as constipation, respiratory ailments such as asthma. It's the aerial parts of the plant really that are used most. Now, if you make a study of the video that I did on causation or on the accompanying article, you'll find that a number of researchers have focused on inflammation, chronic inflammation as a possible cause. That's really where Brahmi is going to zero in again. It is going to be a well-regarded anti-inflammatory, and for those people who believe that Alzheimer's disease is at least in part due to chronic inflammation, Brahmi is going to be one of the ones they're going to want to add to their repertoire. You can read about some of the research that's being done with respect to Brahmi and Alzheimer's, at least in part, the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, as well as in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Another herb that comes to us by way of Ayurveda is Calamus. The root for Calamus is the part of the plant that's used. Mostly it has sedative properties. It is sometimes prescribed for gastrointestinal difficulties, including inflammation, gastritis, ulcers. But it's also used for other kinds of inflammation, including rheumatoid arthritis. Now, Calamus, therefore, straightforwardly might be able to assist in terms of Alzheimer's for those people who, again, believe that Alzheimer's is the result of chronic inflammation. So once again, it's an anti-inflammatory, but it also has antioxidant properties. And in addition to that, it has displayed some acetylcholinesterase inhibiting properties. Now, I go into this in more detail in other places, but one of the factors that people surmise is responsible for Alzheimer's is a decrease in the amount of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Now, when acetylcholine diminishes, this causes a difficulty in terms of the transference of signals between nerve cells or neurons. Now, the body has the ability to create acetylcholine. However, the body also creates a chemical called acetylcholinesterase and the job of that chemical is to destroy free acetylcholine. When scientists noticed that there was a relationship between a decrease in acetylcholine and Alzheimer's disease, one of the interventions that they have attempted is to produce chemicals that inhibit acetylcholinesterase. That is to say, chemicals that try to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine. And there are drugs such as Aricept, or donepezil is the chemical name, that are mainly geared towards this kind of acetylcholinesterase inhibition. However, there are many herbs that have the alleged ability to do similar thing, and one of those is, as we just mentioned, Calamus. And that is according to the International Journal for Preventive Medicine, as well as the Iranian Red Crescent Medical Journal. The Red Crescent in Iran is similar to the Red Cross in the United States, but because of the difference between Islam and Christianity, they select the crescent rather than the cross. A fourth Ayurvedic herb worth mentioning is going to be Cubeb. Cubeb is a kind of pepper. Its scientific name is Piper cubeba. So it's related to black pepper or Piper nigrum, and it's also related to the Indian long pepper or Piper longa, and many other versions and many other variants of the pepper plant. Mostly pepper is going to be useful for gastrointestinal discomfort, things like gas and bloating. It's also sometimes prescribed for bronchial inflammation, bronchitis. So it has anti-inflammatory properties, and this herb, therefore, as well as other kinds of black pepper and other kinds of pepper, possibly holds promise as a quality Alzheimer's intervention, and you can check out the journal Molecules for further information on that. One other sidebar, some people point out that certain variants of pepper, such as Piper nigrum, have the ability of enhancing the absorption of other well-regarded herbs, and one of those is going to be turmeric. So when we get to turmeric, and turmeric is on my top 5, but when we get to turmeric, it's going to be important that sometimes the turmeric capsules maybe that you buy are going to be associated with some kind of bioperine or black pepper extract that's going to supposedly increase the absorption of and the effectiveness of the turmeric that you use. A 5th herb is going to be Indian frankincense. This is also referred to as Boswellia serrata. This is a potent antioxidant. It's used in aromatherapy. It's primarily prescribed for joint ailments. So again, kinds of arthritis, whether osteo or rheumatoid, which signals to you that it is an anti-inflammatory. But it also, independent of its anti-inflammatory properties, supposedly has the ability of boosting memory function and other cognitive abilities in people whose cognitive function is diminished, as well as boosting memory and cognitive function in people of normal brain function. And this is according to the Avicenna Journal of Phytomedicine. A 5th herb worth mentioning is going to be Gotu Kola. Gotu Kola's scientific name is Centella asiatica. It's prescribed for vitality, for energy, even for fertility. It's supposed to counteract infertility, similar to ginseng and some of the others that we'll actually get into in a further video. It's alleged to improve cognitive function, including memory. In general, one of the phrases that we run into again and again in this research is neuroprotective properties. And once again, and in the case of Gotu Kola is alleged to have this neuroprotective ability. But it goes beyond that. In some research, researchers have suggested that it may actually have neuroregenerative ability, which is staggering. This is according to the Malaysian Journal of Medical Sciences. Now, just a word. Obviously, not every journal is of equal weight. Some people are going to say, that's not a reputable journal. All of this information is available through the National Institute of Mental Health in the Library of Medical Research that they have online. And I'm not saying that the presence of an article or the appearance of an article in that repository is automatically evidence of its reliability, but I am saying that I think some of these things are worth at least exploring because they hold out promise, frankly. Another herb, and this is an interestingly named plant, it's actually called the intellect plant or the intellect tree, and its scientific name is Celastris paniculatus. Once again, anti-inflammatory properties, you see a recurring theme, but it also has analgesic properties, which means pain-relieving properties, so it makes it similar in that regard to meadowsweet and white willow that I briefly named earlier. But more interesting for our purposes presently, it has memory-enhancing abilities, and it is also a nervine or a nerve tonic, at least in traditional Indian medicine. And you can see that herb mentioned in the Journal for Neural Regeneration Research. A further plant, and this is another tree, the juniper tree, and in this case we're talking about Juniperus communis, or Juniperus communis. This in general is prescribed for appetitive problems, digestive problems. It's prescribed as an appetite stimulant for people who have a poor appetite, and other kinds of gastrointestinal difficulties like stomach upset, gas, heartburn. But it's also prescribed for urinary tract infections or UTIs. And so in that regard, it'd be similar to cranberry. Once again, interestingly for our purpose, it has alleged acetylcholinesterase inhibiting properties. It's also a potent antioxidant, and you can read more about that herb in regard to its possible uses for Alzheimer's treatment in the Journal of the Science of Food and Agriculture. When you think about acetylcholinesterase inhibition, that's got obvious applications for Alzheimer's disease. But once again, even with respect to antioxidants, now I get into this more in detail in the video on possible causes, but oxidation in general is what causes rust on iron. And the idea is that oxygen, in interacting with our brain chemistry and other body chemistry, can create free radicals and other chemicals and other changes in the body that can cause damage to our cells and tissue over time. And an antioxidant is one chemical that allegedly helps to counteract that. Another Indian herb is Shankapushpi. Shankapushpi, I hope I'm pronouncing that one right. The scientific name on this one is Convolvulus pluricollis. Once again, we're talking about a nerve tonic. It actually has the ability supposedly to counteract anxiety, mental stress, even mental fatigue. It has been associated with the improvement of brain function and memory. So in general, it's alleged to be a cognitive function booster, and that's according to the Journal of Alzheimer's Research and Therapy. Another herb worth mentioning here is Himalayan spikenard, also called Yarostachys yadamansi or jadamansi. Mainly, this is a sleep aid. It's also prescribed for gastrointestinal problems such as constipation and poor digestion, but it also has been studied to possibly boost learning and retention. Now, some of these studies, as this one, were done with mice, and so trying to make the leap to the applicability into human therapies is granted a little bit of a stretch. But once again, because families are suffering, in many cases, some of these herbs have very few side effects. But again, I'm not a medical practitioner. You need to consult with a medical practitioner if you're considering introducing any of these into your diet. But in many cases, their effects are less than some experimental treatments that you might obtain in doing some study on Alzheimer's disease. And so I just offer them to you as research leads. That's it. If you want to read more about Himalayan spikenard, I would invite you to check out the Journal of Medicinal Food. There's at least one other major instance of an Ayurvedic herb that's used in Alzheimer's treatment, and that is turmeric. But turmeric, because of its potency and its uses, I had to place it in my top 5. So I'm going to get into that further in a future video. But if you appreciated some of the content in this video, please like the videos. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to be alerted to new content, especially parts 2 and 3 to this video. Since these are simply offered as research leads, I feel confident in saying that even a person who is not necessarily into alternative therapies can still appreciate the fact that Western and other researchers are trying to follow up on some of these plants because of their reputations in folk medicine. So they're offering research leads, if nothing else, but for some people, they may actually be available that you can introduce into your diet. And if you're interested in learning more, I would invite you to click on the link that I have in the description, and that will take you to the article that I've written on this and other topics on alzheimersproof.com. I look forward to seeing you again in another video, and I thank you for being with me today.